It's more about, what do you care about? What do you want to achieve in your life? What's your calling, right? And that's one of the things that... Welcome back to my channel, the best place for hardworking and ambitious millennial professionals who feel stuck in their careers to find and transition into their dream careers. Now, recently, JLin announced he's leaving a highly successful year in China to pursue a return to the NBA at the age of 32, which is considered the tail end of one's prime, especially in basketball. It's a curious decision, and being a channel that focuses on career decisions, I want to dedicate this video to discussing his case. Make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell to receive regular updates on all things related to bringing positive change to your career. Also, join my Facebook group called Career Change Advice, where you can chat with like-minded people who are interested in making their careers work for them and not the other way around. Hi, I'm Dr. John Tam. I have a PhD in sociology from the University of Oxford, and I'm passionate about helping millennial professionals find their dream careers through gaining clarity and building soft skills. In this video, I'm going to break it down into two parts. The first half of the video, I'm going to talk about JLin's basketball career up to this point, from being drafted to his time in China. In the second half, I'm going to break down the psychology behind his decision, his personality, his faith, and the sociology and culture behind it, and of course the overall calculus for his decision to return to the NBA. Now, his career has gone on for almost 10 years now, so in this video, expect a high-level look, a bird's eye view of his career and some of the important stops along the way. I can't dive into the details because it's just not realistic in this video. But JLin, he started out his basketball career as a high school player in Palo Alto, and then he led his high school to a state championship. And despite leading his team to a state championship, he didn't get a lot of offers from tier 1 basketball schools, but he did get one from Harvard. Now, playing at Harvard, he was pretty much the best player on his team, but he didn't really stand out in the NBA draft where players get picked onto NBA teams. But he was eventually drafted by the Golden State Warriors, but then got cut by the Golden State Warriors, and then the Rockets picked him up, and then they cut him as well, despite both teams being impressed. And so JLin really started his NBA career in New York, and as the first, full-time permanent team. And that's when Linsanity happened, which is what people talk about to this day because it was such a legendary moment. And in fact, they've made documentaries and everything about it, even though Linsanity proper only spanned approximately 30 games. But the story goes that Carmelo Anthony, the star of New York at that time, was coming back from injury. Because JLin was such a ball-dominant player, they had chemistry problems, and so Melo eventually didn't want JLin to come back. Now, the season on Linsanity also was shortened because he got injured partway through, but before long he found himself back at the Rockets, where he played for a while, shared the ball with James Harden, and he's another ball dominant player. And so he didn't last very long there. He went to the Lakers, and then with Kobe Bryant, and of course playing with another ball dominant player doesn't really bode well for him. Went to the Hornets after that, and on the Hornets he was able to dominate the ball, and he did relatively well. That's also when he kind of had that crazy Sendo haircut from Slam Dunk. And then he moved on to the Nets 2016 to 2018, where he had an injury riddled several years there, including a season-ending ruptured patellar tendon in his right knee in the 2017-2018 campaign. After that, he was traded to the Hawks, and with the Hawks he played relatively well, and he mentored Trae Young, who was a budding star. And then after that, his contract was bought out, and he went to the Raptors, where he won his first championship. Now, when he was with the Raptors, and I'm in Toronto and I follow the Raptors, so I know this part very well, right? He didn't play that well for the Raptors because the main fact of the matter is during the 10 years, the game has changed significantly. Now, during the regular season, he was okay, like he was serviceable and he was doing well, but during the playoffs, despite Coach Nick Nurse giving him so many opportunities to play, he simply was not hitting his threes. And watching those games, those were like wide open looks that he was getting, and he was not hitting them. I think he was hitting something like, in the 10s to 20%. And the average NBA player hits about 33 to 34% nowadays, right? If you're shooting threes. And so despite on the Atlanta Hawks, he was hitting in his like high 30s for his threes. Once he got to the Raptors, he wasn't hitting that rate, and in the playoffs, it just simply plummeted, and basically he got his minutes cut. And in fact, in the finals, there's a video that was made trolling him that, his contribution to the Raptors championship was minimal. And I really got to give credit to Coach Nick at B-Ball Breakdown for his awesome video on the real reason on why JLin is gone. His breakdown of JLin is basically this. JLin didn't get playing time because his threes didn't drop, but essentially when Linsanity broke out, the NBA was still a slashing pick and roll type of game, and Jeremy Lin really needs the ball in his hands to be a creator. And so when he has the ball in his hands and the offense like revolves around him like it did in Linsanity, then things are humming because he's a very intelligent player. He is deceptively athletic and he's really good at the pick and roll. However, the game's changed, the pace has increased, and shooting threes is essentially a must-have skill for guards. And Jeremy Lin, being a ball dominant but not exactly a three-point specialist, it works to his detriment over time. Now, on top of that, Jeremy Lin had to battle the bamboo ceiling in American athletics, and he's vocal about the racism he experienced in basketball, especially in college, where he was basically called names by drunk students on the sidelines all the time. But when he went to the NBA, he did state that there felt like there was a glass ceiling there, and in the case of Asians, we call it the bamboo ceiling, where it's basically confirmation bias, where a lot of stereotypes are made against Asians that makes their margin for error so much less because people will be looking for reasons to not play them. I want to show you a segment from the SCMP, the South China Morning Post, by Jonathan White that was published last year, right when Jeremy Lin was moving to China. And I'm just going to read it out from here, right? Last year on Reddit, Houston Rockets chairman Daryl Morey had told Moneyball author Michael Lewis about his regret over passing on Lin for Lewis's 2016 book on the Undoing Project. He lit up our model, said Morey. Our model said take him with like the 15th pick in the draft. They passed as they did every other team. Morey revealed that when 12 months later, the Rockets added the speed of a player's first 2 steps to their scouting, Lin topped the charts. He's incredibly athletic, said Morey, but the reality is that every effing person, including me, thought he was unathletic, and I can't think of any reason for it other than he was Asian. And while Daryl Morey was willing to admit that, not everyone in basketball has. And these are things that Jeremy Lin has battled with throughout his basketball career, whether it's in the NBA, in college, or even in high school, where he faced it at every step of the way. And the effect of his bias is something that Lin has spoken eloquently about, but it's not too hard to imagine that, what if he was in a different alternate universe, alternate timeline where he could have been the face of a franchise, because the advanced analytics do show that this guy, if you take everything into consideration and take all the variables into consideration, this guy is a top tier player. And this type of bias that he faces also shows up in fouls being called, as there's this video with like 2.1 million views that I'll put in the details below that outlines the calls that he doesn't get in the NBA. Now, the average NBA players play about 6 to 8 years in the league, and so I want to give an example of another player who has followed a similar trail as Lin, and this player is even more famous than Lin. So let me know if you can guess who he is. All right, so first gets picked and then moves to a team where he's really able to fulfill his potential, joins another team where the career becomes steady, and then starts the journeyman career. And then afterwards, not being able to cut it in the NBA for a while, players would go to China, and in China they'll get a Chinese name, and if you can read that, awesome, right? And afterwards they would go back to the NBA for one last shot for the championship or a comeback. Let me know if you know who this player is, right? And if you can read Chinese, you would have guessed already, but if you can't, guess who he is. And yeah, that was kind of an excuse for me to show my fandom of this player and how I have a whole bunch of like bootleg jerseys from China. But anyways, this is a typical progression for any player that has somewhat of a profile that can play, is basically go in the NBA, try it for a number of years, go play overseas, whether it's in China or Europe or even in South America, and then make a comeback to the NBA. It is not unheard of, it's totally normal, and you have stars doing it and you also have journeymen doing it, right? And so following these past players, Jeremy Lin made the jump to China. For him, it makes total sense. And this was right after winning a championship. No one was willing to sign him because of the performance he had with the Raptors, leading to the famous "it keeps getting more rock bottom" clip.
Man, it's hard.
真的好难哦
Life is hard.
人生真的好艰难。
In English, there's a saying, and it says, once you hit rock bottom, the only way is up. But rock bottom just seems to keep getting more and more rock bottom for me. And so, free agency has been tough, because I feel like in some ways the NBA has kind of given up on me. And after the season, I had to get ready for this Asia trip. And it was the last thing I wanted to do. Because I knew for 6 weeks I would have to just put on a smile. I would have to talk about a championship that I don't feel like I really earned. I have to talk about a future that I don't know if I want to have. And honestly, it's embarrassing and it's tough.
Now, I also want to say that going to China actually made total sense, because even before going to CBA, he was one of the most popular players in China already, right? And what's not to like about him? He's got all the model Asian minority stuff going for him, right? He plays basketball, and basketball is like the most popular sport in China for young people. And then he has a Harvard undergrad, right? Another huge China thing. He's tall, he's charismatic, and he's definitely very marketable. And he's also homies with powerful cultural icons with like Jay Chou, who is pretty much the godfather of music in Asia. And also MC Jin, after his failed stint with the Rough Riders, he moved to Hong Kong to pursue an acting and commercial career. And then he went to China for the hip hop competition, and he basically blew up after that, and he's like leading the whole hip-hop movement in China. And by going over, Jeremy Lin automatically gets put onto the pedestal. Now, the most popular player all time in China is Kobe Bryant, and currently the most popular player is Jeremy Lin. And basically, by going over, there were no shortages of endorsements. Given his look, his face, and his youth, he's definitely much more marketable than someone like Yao Ming. And after going over to China, he signed with the Beijing Ducks, and he basically had an all-star campaign. Given the much weaker competition in terms of the speed and the spacing and the amount of time that you have to do what you need to do, he was basically able to dominate the ball, play his game, and really excel in China. Now, so much so that teams had to beat him up. And there's even publications about opposing teams bragging about how they were knocking him down and making him bleed. And I'm literally not kidding when I say like make him bleed, because here's a picture of him bleeding. And having played basketball in Hong Kong and China myself, you know, just recreationally, the culture is very different there, and I am totally not surprised to see something like Shaolin Soccer happen to Jeremy Lin. So much so that Jeremy Lin had to be very vocal about better reffing during the playoffs, and eventually he lost in the semifinals against the Raptors young gun star Sonny Weems, who also made his way to China and is a star there now, right? But basically there were no shortages of press coverage in China, where he basically had his face plastered on posters, and also numerous endorsement opportunities like having his own shoe and other big brands backing him up, such as Coach and Tiger Balm. And so going to China is really a change of fortune for him, right? And just a switch of context where there's increased homophily, and homophily is basically homo is similar, phily is love. People love those who are similar to themselves. And by Jeremy Lin moving to China, he was basically embraced by China, East Asia in general, and he had everything going for him basically. Now that's a brief overview of his career up to this point so far, and I've left many details out because it's really not possible to cover one's life and career in a single video. What story pops up for you in Jeremy Lin's story? Let me know in the comments. Now, as of filming this video, last week, he released a clip announcing his return to the NBA.
我是想直接跟你们讲，我决定了，我今年不回首钢去打球，那这个决定真的是我人生最难的一个决定我花了4个礼拜，然后我这2-3个礼拜一直不能睡每个早上4点5点就起床了，然后一直在想可是到最后。我不知道，我就是觉得，虽然首钢对我非常非常好，我的队友、我的教练，秦总给我全部想要的，可是到最后我还是觉得我有一个 NBA 的梦想，然后我还有时间可以打球，那我必须要去追。我知道很多的球迷，不管我受伤、被交易、失败，你们都支持我。然后你们一直鼓励我，你们一直跟我讲 never done， 那我觉得对我来说，这个信仰，相信上帝的路，相信上帝给我这个天分，是应该的。那我必须要很勇敢的去追这个梦想。可是为什么这个决定那么难？你知道，我昨天我跟我家人朋友分享的时候，我在讲我需要离开中国，我哭了。眼泪了，然后因为我知道今年是一个那么特别的一年，我可以就是跟首钢打了1年，这个真的我永远不会忘记。那每天可以看到这些球迷，我真的是很感动，所以非常难的一个决定。可是我只是想说， 谢谢大家，我爱你们，可是这个决定我必须要做的。
On the clip, he also wrote Proverbs 16 verses 3, which in the NIV is commit to the Lord whatever you do and he will establish your plans. And I want to break this clip down because this is the turning point for his career, right? He is at a career crossroads and this is what this channel focuses on. Now moving on to the second part of this video and breaking this clip down, I have several observations about the psychology of work, JLin's personality, his faith, how he navigates culture, and just his overall logical calculus. The first point I want to make is that passion is more important than money, and that's totally normal. And I want to nuance this a lot more because I'm not saying money is not important, but after you hit a certain threshold for your income, and usually in the Western world that's around 60 to 80K, right, depending on the neighborhood you live in. After you hit that threshold, money actually gets diminishing returns in terms of its correlation to happiness. So if you think about the amount of money you get, if you make this much money, once you hit 60,000, it flattens for every extra dollar you get. And the reason for that is quite simple, because most of your fundamental needs are met. So if you go into Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And once all those fundamental needs are met, anything that you pursue that's beyond fundamental sustenance is about self-actualization, about fulfilling your passion, about pursuing something that's higher than yourself, right? The higher purpose sort of thing. And that's what we're seeing with JLin. You see a lot of people on Twitter bash him for that. It keeps getting more rock bottom video. And they're like, you know, oh yeah, you're a millionaire, or you're a basketball player, like, and you made 50 million over your career. What are you crying about, right? Well, the truth of the matter is, for people who have met a certain level of financial stability, it's no longer about the money. It's about the pursuit of happiness. And so in his case, I totally understand. And that actually applies to pretty much anyone else. And even for the clients that I work with, none of them are starving. They're all working decently paying jobs. They're all, you know, living quite well. However, they're just not happy. And the reason they're not happy is because, well, all the fundamental needs are met. What's next, right? And this really highlights the importance of having clear career goals, because if you don't have a clear goal, what you're going to get are random results. And for JLin, the NBA is still his dream, and now is not the time to give it up. And so he follows the path of others who have also gone to China and back. And if you haven't figured out who it was what I was talking about, I was actually talking about Tracy McGrady, right? Superstar in the NBA, best of his time. Some people said he was even better than Kobe. And, you know, him and Kobe went back and forth on, you know, on that time they played in, I think in Germany, in practice, and how T-Mac schooled Kobe. And Kobe said, like, T-Mac's the only guy who could ever take him one-on-one. And even like T-Mac, who was one of the best in the game, he went to China and came back to pursue that championship, to pursue that ring, right? And of course, he failed that in the Spurs campaign. And so the point is, if you look at that video of JLin talking about his dreams and his pursuits, and we know JLin is very vocal about his faith. He's a evangelical Christian.
As I get older and I get closer and closer to retirement, the one thing I think about is God gave me so many miracles in my story. And I think when I was younger, I always wanted to chase that next achievement. I always wanted to chase that next season. I always wanted to chase that next goal. As I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize, wow, my story is miraculous. My story was one of a kind, literally one of a kind. No one else in the history of the world has ever been able to experience or go through something like this. And I know that it's not because I'm so amazing and I put in all the hard work. I mean, there are other people who work just as hard as me. There are other people who love the game just as much as me. But, you know, I'm just like, man, it's miracle after miracle after miracle.
And so one of the big takeaways that we can take from this is that JLin is doing this not because of money, because there's plenty of that in China with all the endorsements and everything, probably more than he could ever make in the US. But the bottom line is he is pursuing his passion, he's pursuing his calling, and he clearly has a clear career goal, which he struggled with for 2 weeks before he decided to, you know what, I'm gonna take the plunge. And it also makes sense in terms of a logical calculus. I mean, because he's 32, he's not exactly old by NBA standards. He's at the tail end of his prime, and the opportunity to play in the NBA, it's still there. China's not going anywhere. Why not? And the second thing I want to do is dive into JLin's personality, because I want to show that he's not a vain and narcissistic person. And I want to give a quick disclaimer that I don't know JLin personally, and this is not a diagnosis. And these are just my observations and seeing how he carries himself in public and what I've heard down the grapevine in Christian evangelical circles, right? And so here's my observations, and I'm going to use the big 5 personality traits to break it down. Now, the first personality trait, which is the openness to experience, I'll say he's high in openness to experience because number one, he's multicultural. He sees multiple angles. He's clearly highly intelligent, right? Because he made it into Harvard, and he's obviously multi-talented. And having high openness to experience is highly correlated to having a high IQ. And this guy clearly has a high IQ. If you look at him play basketball, he plays with a high IQ game as well. So openness to experience, definitely high. The second personality trait is trait conscientiousness, and for that I will also give him very high because he clearly has a strong ethic, balancing, you know, basketball in high school to getting into Harvard, right? His grades, and then basketball as well. And then in the NBA, he clearly has a strong work ethic. Despite numerous setbacks such as injuries, he's able to work himself back into shape and just bounce back from that. And so he's definitely conscientious. He definitely knows how to put the work in, and he's focused and he takes action. The third personality trait is extroversion. And I would say he's an ambivert, which is, you know, the ones that's in the middle between an extrovert and an introvert. He's not either in the extreme. He's an ambivert. And the reason for that is because, well, number one, it's difficult to get those grades to get into Harvard if you're a pure extrovert. And I'm not saying there aren't extroverts in Harvard, but the fact is, introverted people tend to be able to sit down and focus and get work done. And this guy clearly is able to get work done. And also another thing is that extroversion is highly correlated with positive emotionality. And so if someone is very optimistic and happy and always, you know, going to pursue the next thing, this person is probably an extrovert. Now, JLin, he's positive a lot of times, but he also shown that he's, you know, he can get really down and unhappy. And he also comes across as slightly quirky and awkward. And I was looking at one of the episodes he was doing in a reality TV show where he was, you know, interacting with his teammates in basketball in China. And he was like, yeah, I want my own space. I want my boundaries. I want my barriers. And, you know, I want some privacy, right? And the fact that he's seeking this balance shows that he's an ambivert by nature. The fourth personality trait we need to look at is trait agreeableness, right? And you notice we're creating the acronym OCEAN right now. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness. Next one is going to be the end. But for agreeableness, I would say he's actually in the middle. He is not disagreeable. In fact, he is probably too nice to a fault. And for agreeableness, I'll actually put him in the mid-high, right? I would actually say he's a very nice person. He's a very much of a team player. He's friendly with people. He doesn't have that Kobe Bryant, I'm going to, you know, eliminate you off the face of the planet kind of look when he plays basketball. He plays basketball and it's a game. And he takes it seriously, but he's not going to destroy you and kill you. He's also not known to bark at his teammates or to call them out or to just do something that will offend people. And in fact, when he's in a room with other alphas, right, like Carmelo Anthony, like Kobe Bryant, like James Harden, he's always taken second seat. Now, it's probably because those are also designated franchise players and the face of the franchises. So, and that's why you can see when he was at different stints in different stages of his journey in the NBA, he's never really been one to be like super alpha to assert himself. He's always been the team player, the consummate team player that gets along with everybody else. And that's why I would say he's medium high in agreeableness. There may be a factor of culture where, like, you know, if you're Asian already, you're fighting that bamboo ceiling, and if you're disagreeable, you know, you'll get kicked out. It might have to do with his upbringing in terms of being Chinese, in terms of being in the middle class, and also being a Christian. And basically, all these things put together makes him quite an agreeable person, which actually doesn't bode well for a cutthroat alpha kind of competition situation. The last personality trait I want to talk about is trait neuroticism. And trait neuroticism is basically how prone you are to stress, right? The more neurotic you are, the more stress prone you are, right? And in that case, I would say he's actually in the middle as well. He plays with fire and passion, and he does show this fire and passion when he plays basketball. But you can also tell he can be rattled, and he's only human. That's totally understandable. So someone who is extremely low in trait neuroticism would be like a Kawhi Leonard or Michael Jordan, who are basically like stone-faced machines that will destroy you on the basketball court. JLin is definitely not that, and being low in trait neuroticism is actually quite useful in basketball because that means you can perform at a consistent level. But in terms of JLin, you can tell that he does get rattled a little bit on the court, especially if things are not going his way. And also on top of that, this is more of a Chinese medicine thing, right? He'll get zits at age 31, and he, you know, the
second biggest issue is I just got a huge zit. I guess makeup.
Which suggests that, you know, he's heyday or shanghuo, right? And anytime you have that kind of like inner heat, it also suggests you are higher in trait neuroticism. And so there's some stress that's constantly brewing there, and exercise helps get rid of it. You know, introversion is also somewhat related to neuroticism as well. And having broken down his personality and how it worked out for him in the NBA, I want to talk about, you know, the narcissistic personality. A narcissistic personality is someone who is high in extroversion, low in neuroticism, and low in agreeableness. And like I said, Jeremy Lin is in the middle for extroversion, in the middle for neuroticism, and he's also mid-high for agreeableness. Now, for someone with a vain personality, the typical profile is someone who is high in extroversion, high in conscientiousness, low in neuroticism, and low in agreeableness. And once again, that is not Jeremy Lin. So a narcissistic and vain personality is not his, and therefore all the money, gold, splendor of playing in China will actually not be that appealing to him. And that's also another reason why he's going back to the States and giving the NBA another shot, because his personality simply isn't attracted by all the glamour of playing in China. That was the big 5 personality traits, and if you want to check out your personality, I would suggest you take the free personality test that I'll put in the links below. But just a heads up, I do run a career coaching business, and you will be joining my mailing list. So just a heads up when you sign up for that, okay? Well, the third point is this. For Jeremy Lin, there is something greater than money and fame, and that is his faith. And being in Toronto, when he was playing for the Raptors, I remember very well that in last year's campaign, in about March or April, he suddenly reached out to a pastor friend of mine and kind of told him like, hey, I want to do a testimony night and sharing, kind of an impromptu thing, and you know, can you host for us, right? And RH3C, which is the church, can, you know, it seats the most people in this neighborhood. And suddenly, in a matter of 2-3 days, the whole community knew that Jeremy Lin was going to Richmond Hill Chinese Community Church, and like thousands of people signed up. Even non-Christian friends of mine who follow Jeremy Lin, you know, decided to show up that night, right? I didn't go because I knew it was going to be like, you know, packed and crazy. But that shows for him, you know, the priority of his faith, right? In the middle of a campaign, I think it was like just coming back from a road trip, he wanted to like do 1 day of sharing. Like, that's what he did. He just called this event out of the blue. And so faith is obviously very important for him. And I want to talk about the psychological mechanism of faith, because faith is obviously something that's existed since like humans were able to see the stars, right? And one of the main psychological mechanisms of the Christian faith in particular is that of gratitude, right? You are to give thanks to the Lord. You are to give thanks for this and that. And having a thankful heart, we know now in psychology that when you have gratitude, you focus on things outside of yourself, and that you are focused on the positive things that are around you. It reframes your mind. It literally rewires your brain and hacks your whole like depressed mentality and so on. And it's actually a very powerful mechanism to deal with neuroticism and to deal with adversity. And that's why people have been doing it since like forever. Because one of the guarantees in life is suffering. And this is not a Christian thing. This is like Buddhism. The very first tenet is life is suffering, right? And so it's like a common understanding that life is suffering, and to deal with that, gratitude or focusing on things that are greater than yourself is super important. Another major psychological mechanism of religion, of faith, is that of prayer and meditation. And I actually had to look this up for prayer and meditation. And what I found was that the mechanisms of prayer in terms of mindfulness and relaxation, and in terms of giving your problems to a being that's greater than you, learning how to let go, the mechanisms are actually the same as meditation. So the psychological benefits that you do when you pray versus when you meditate is literally the same. Like it does the same thing to your brain. And so that's why for Jeremy Lin, I think given the high adversity of life that he has to live in terms of, you know, balancing basketball and academics, in terms of the, you know, just traveling the world, in terms of the setbacks that he had to face throughout his career, faith is a huge part of it. And it helps deal with his neuroticism. It helps deal with any like pessimism. And that's also probably why he's so vocal about it, because it's thoroughly integrated at each phase of his life. And given the restrictions on religion in China, he does use Taiwan as his faith platform. And in fact, he got his Taiwan citizenship on August 2020. It also helps that his parents are actually from Taiwan and not mainland China as well. Which brings me to my next point, which is culture and society. Given that Jeremy Lin has placed such a high priority on faith in his life, it's no surprise that he also wants to give back, because the whole Christian belief system is that, you know, God gives you a calling and then you need to go fulfill it, and then you need to use that to further his kingdom, right? So which is essentially that is not possible in China given the religious freedom restrictions there. However, given this is such a volatile time in, you know, our lifetime. And given it's 2020 and it's been like a very bad year for everybody, and like US elections are coming up, there's racial tensions everywhere. And Jeremy Lin is clearly concerned about social justice issues, as he did call Donald Trump out for enabling racial tensions. This is not my position, I'm just telling you what Lin said, right? But at the end of the day, Jeremy Lin has a vision and calling for his career that is a lot more than just things like basketball, money, and fame. He sets his vision to be what we call kingdom-minded, and that, along with a number of other reasons, is the reason why he's coming back. Finally, my last point is this: living abroad and living internationally is not for everyone. And from my experience, I've lived abroad for like 8 years of my life at different countries, right? Whether it's in the UK, US, in Korea, Hong Kong, China, and so on. I've lived abroad for a long time, and one of the things is that every time you move abroad, there's 4 phases of culture shock. And the first phase is the honeymoon period, right? Everything's fine and dandy, you love it there, everything's new and exciting. And then you hit the culture shock phase where it's like, hey, wait a second, you know, life is getting practical and it's getting difficult and it's not as easy as I thought it'd be. And then you hit an adjustment phase where you're like, okay, how do I adjust to this? How do I navigate this situation? And then you finally adapt. And the process does speed up with homophily, given Jeremy Lin went to China and he's ethnically Chinese, so he doesn't stand out, but he's also very high profile. So in terms of his life, it actually is not that easy to navigate. So at the end of the day, when you look at how Jeremy Lin approaches his career, there's several things that you can really draw from. Number one, he obviously is coming from a position of abundance, right? He's not really lacking in terms of financials or, you know, fame, popularity, notoriety, and skills and so on. I mean, he's obviously a very talented individual who's done very well for himself. However, at the same time, this does not diminish the importance of having career goals. Many of us in our lives are very established. We're very good at what we do, but at the same time, we also get stuck. Everyone gets stuck at some point in your life. And if anyone tells you that they've never felt stuck, or if they've never met adversity, or if they never had to like have these breakthrough moments and where they are at a crossroads and they need to decide, hey, which way should I go? They're lying to you, right? It happens to everybody. And so one of the common things that you see in the workplace is that a lot of people feel like when they first get to something and they're like, oh, this is awesome, I'm in a state of flow and I love what I do. But as time goes by, you get better at what you do, you're done learning, and basically you just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And at some point it's like, okay, is this it? You know, what's my next challenge? What do I want to look for next? And a lot of times that's actually the major hurdle that people struggle with, right? They don't want to drop the titles, they don't want to give up what they've, you know, fought so hard for. And it's understandable because, you know, whenever you lose that title or you lose that prestige or you lose something, you come from a position of loss. You're like, something's being taken away from you. But I think there's a lesson to be learned from Jeremy Lin's story, that when you approach it from a perspective of there's something greater than you, and in his case, obviously his faith and higher calling has something to do with it. The fact that he is an authority and he's a voice in terms of Asian Americans and Asians in general across the world, that matters, that carries a lot of weight. And also the fact that he has dreams for his NBA career and that he doesn't want to give up on it, that's also totally understandable. After all, I mean, if he's getting JLin soccer treatment in China, you know, all the money in the world isn't going to help him, because, like, you know, one time in the playoffs he got smacked in the head and he lost his hearing for a bit. I mean, like, this is like some pretty serious stuff we're talking about here. I don't mean to trivialize it, but it's what he's dealing with in China. And so there's a number of things that comes in this calculus, but at the end of the day, he has a clear vision for his career. He knows where he wants it to go. He feels there's a higher calling that's drawing him to a certain direction, and all the power to him, right? And that's basically how the cookie crumbles for him. And so in this video, I hope I've been able to highlight the many complexities and layers of Jeremy Lin's journey up to this point, from his high school to college to his NBA career to his career in China, and basically how the human psychology works, how personality works, and how, you know, one's career calling and one's career passion is really, you know, important to be the guiding post in finding the next steps in your career. And that's really one of the focuses that we have in this channel. It's not about just getting a job or filling in that resume or interview hacks and so on. It's more about, you know, what do you care about? What do you want to achieve in your life? What's your calling, right? And that's one of the things that we explore here in this channel. And the fact of the matter is, each stage in your life, it's going to be different, and we're going to keep pivoting, because at one point you may be in your 20s, you're hustling, In your 30s, you're like, you start having a family, you want to settle down a bit. And in your 40s, you're like, my kids are up, I want to go hustle again, right? Like, every stage is going to be different. And so if this is what you're interested in learning more about and just following, I encourage you to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can receive regular updates for my videos when they come out. Also, leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts and what else you want to hear about. Don't forget to give this video a like and share it with your network if you found this to be valuable. Take care.